Good morning. Hi, everyone. This is Emily.
And this is Justin. Thanks for those of you on the Pacific time for starting your day with us. And
Yes,
those of
thank
you
you.
not on Pacific time, hopefully your coffee is kicked in.
Yes.
So here we are, and we're going to talk today about awake leaders.
Yes, we are so excited to have this topic and to be presenting it to you today. So we're just really thrilled. So please excuse our enthusiasm. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started and roll into our material here. We definitely encourage you to tweet or share on your social media platform of choice any of our pithy tidbits that you find to be worthy of sharing. Please use a hashtag #AwakeLeader so we can find it and then retweet it and share it and give it lots of love. You can also tag us at Root and River. That's our handle on Twitter and Instagram, and share your comments and questions that way as well. We will be using the chat feature inside of GoToWebinar. So we'll be asking you some questions and then politely pausing to give you time to type your responses in chat. Sometimes we don't do that, but we're going to be very mindful of that today so that we can have an engaging conversation around awake leadership. And before we get started, as everything with Root and River.
Yeah, we always like to start with an intention. This was a new thing for me up until I started doing yoga last year. And at the beginning of the class, it was always, do you have an intention? And mine was like, yeah, to get through this, was usually my intention. It's still pretty much my intention when I do yoga. But we wanted you to think about what your intention, what you're setting aside an hour of your time today, which is priceless, and to listen to us. And what is your intention for the webinar?
Right.
And if you feel inspired, you can type your intention into the chat. But if you don't want to keep it to yourself, that's just fine too.
And while you mull that over and type away, if you are so moved, we'll talk about our intention. So Justin, what's your intention?
To get through this. No, no, my intention is that we would just speak truth through this whole thing. It's like, what we're talking about today is, somewhat controversial, I guess you could say, or it's something you don't hear about in business very much. Everything's about spreadsheets and human capital and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just excited. So my intention is to speak truth.
Great. Yeah, my intention is to begin this conversation. I think it's a much broader conversation. It's much bigger than us. And I think it's captured something in your heart and in your imagination. And so I see this as the beginning of a long conversation about awake leadership. And so my intention is to set it off on a good foot.
Great.
And any others that came in, I think we got maybe another intention.
Yeah, just one. Someone said to learn what it means to be a leader who is awake and how to describe it to his clients.
Oh, that's cool. Good idea.
Another one is my intention is to continue to follow thought leaders who I believe are aligned with my own values.
Awesome.
Great.
Intentions.
And as others come to you, go right ahead and post them if you'd like. If not, that's quite okay.
All right, so let's dig in. So exciting.
So something is happening, and when we talk to people, there's a group of us that sort of see it. And I don't want to sound, too woo-woo-y, but there's some sort of awakening that's happening where this seed that was planted at some time ago is popping through the ground, and we're seeing it in the people that we interact with.
Yes.
One of our clients is in his early 60s as a safety consultant who had this awakening a number of years ago that he wanted to transform how businesses saw humans, especially through the lens of safety.
Yes, working men and women.
Yeah, working men and women and seeing the value of human life. We have the lady we met that's your friend.
Yeah, just the other night, somebody came to us after a very brief introduction and has been a lawyer practicing law for 30 years and has also for 30 years / her entire lifetime felt a call to do something deeper, something more meaningful and really connected to who she was at the soul level, and decided she's not going to waste any more time pretending to be somebody she isn't, and is looking forward for the opportunity to share her gifts in that realm with
Right.
other people. So we also have another client.
Yeah, it's
escaping corporate.
Yeah, escaping the corporate life and going to live her calling.
Yes.
She was the head of corporate communications for a very large company that you would all recognize. And again, kind of like the other one that Emily was mentioning, a person who kind of had to hide who she really was in order to just make it through corporate life. And one of our mantras, many mantras at Root and River, is don't add more pretense to the world. So there's something about this awakening that is tied to brand. So these people are not coming to us, and there's many other stories we could share.
Yes.
But these people are not coming to us because they're interested in having a better website traffic, or they some sort of
how can I get more followers?
Yeah, how can I get more followers,
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, or I have this crappy product that nobody wants, and I want you to figure out how to market it.
Right.
I used to get a lot of that.
Yeah, we did.
So anyway, but what we're getting now is this understanding that this calling, this awakening, is the brand.
Yes.
So this awakening was driven by a series of events that are a series of what we call natural forces that have begun to reshape society.
Yes.
And some of them have been dormant for years and years and years, and some of them have exploded onto the scene, largely triggered by the internet, the technology proliferation, especially around smartphones.
And what that really means is our connections to one another and our ability to really speak from our hearts directly to other people
Right.
who are in that same space, who are feeling the impact of these natural forces.
Right. So the first one that we refer to is return to meaning.
And so evidence of this return to meaning is that soulfulness is sort of on the rise. We see, because of a crumbling of institutions, maybe one of them among them being organized religion, we see this rise literally in the sale of yoga mats and the rise of podcasts versus a steep drop in church attendance and kind of televangelists and traditional religion. So people are really going inward in a lot en masse
to
find meaning, right, and connecting to these different outlets to do so. That's one of them.
Yeah, and it's happening in the corporate environment too.
Absolutely.
I mean, the soulfulness is returning to, it's like our great friend Court Dial talks about all-in leadership, and a return to meaning, not just making money. And hey, we're capitalists. We have nothing wrong with making money, but it's about that intention. Related to this then too, in return to meaning, is this desire for rich experiences, sort of a shift away from materialism to using you're having a life where you go have rich experiences, and we expect it in even in microscopic ways, as seen by Yelp reviews, where we need things that are rich.
Yeah, kind of a quick example of this. My husband attended the Infusionsoft conference yesterday, and the main speaker was Marcus Lamanis. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he's the CEO of Camping World, huge entrepreneur, very successful. And you know how they have these conferences and the music's pumping and everyone's like, they got the lights going. He was literally sitting in the audience, told the organizers to turn off the music, turn up the lights, facilitated his entire talk as a conversation about the stories in the room, and went around and talked to people and asked them to share something that they'd never told anyone before. Said it was a phenomenal experience, but it was the opportunity, and he talked about this, to shift the experience completely, to make it more real, more authentic, and connect people on a deeper level.
I love that.
Yeah.
Which leads to this last point for this particular trend or natural force that's creating this awakening, which is a growth mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And we could do an entire webinar just on this and how it hurts your brand or helps your brand.
Yeah.
But really what we mean is that we live in a time of great comfort, or great tangible abundance, where we can change our lives with a couple clicks of a button. Yet there's still a lot of unhappy people. And that's because we carry a scarcity mindset into experiences. We carry a scarcity mindset into our businesses, where we often will hear, well, here's what I need to make to get by.
Right.
I'm just trying to scrape out a living, and there's a lot of this scarcity language that permeates business. But the people that have a growth mindset, even if they don't have money in the bank, what they're doing is they're still creating richness with their offerings to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the return to meaning.
Yes. So the next trend that we would point to is living authentically. So we hear a lot about authenticity, and we're always very careful of the words that we use here at Root and River, but very intentional on the use of authentic, even though it has become a buzzword. Basically, a drive in society and for people to be able to live more as themselves. Culture has become not about homogenization, but about celebrating the uniqueness of each individual. One of my favorite sayings is "Go be you in the world," mm-hmm. And particularly driven by perhaps the millennial generation, who were mm-hmm. fostered in a way that made it a celebration to be who they were and to mm-hmm. find their way, and partially just some of the other forces that we usually speak about. We have this drive to go live authentically. Mm-hmm. That means sharing our beliefs openly and connecting us all to a tribe.
Yeah, and it's much easier to find a tribe now. Mm-hmm. With meetups and social media and Facebook. You can go find people that are like you or that you have a kinship with and build a tribe. And what this means from a brand perspective in particular is there's no need for pretense. So let alone, don't add more pretense. There's no need to put on a costume of what you're supposed to look like. Now, we still see it. It's rampant, especially in corporate America, of, a perpetual, vast bowl of oatmeal of sameness. But there are little people that crop up here and there. And there's one guy that that I spoke at one of the major clients that we work with, again, a company you would recognize. And we were doing a workshop, and I saw that this one guy had a book on mindfulness, and he brought it with him. Yeah. And there were 60 people in the room, and it was sort of a standard corporate setting. Mm-hmm. He was different. He had a different energy to him. And so on a break, I asked him, what's the book for? And he says, I got to figure out how to not have this place crush my soul. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And he had this awakeness to him that he wasn't leaving that institution. He was trying to make change inside of it by living authentically.
Well, and probably pretty intentionally leaving that book out. He could very well have left it in his bag.
Yes, yeah. Right. It was a slight statement because he had laid it on the table, and I'm like, we're not getting any reading done here. But then I realized later it was a statement.
Yeah, it was probably an invitation too to find other members of his tribe.
And he was the only one that I connected with.
Surprise, surprise. So this is one of my favorites. We see this rebirth of art everywhere. In major cities, if you become aware to this as you travel around, as you move throughout your own city, you'll see a resurgence of whether it's graffiti art or it's intentionally placed art in public spaces. Even the way the public spaces are being designed now, they're moving from utilitarian purposes to spaces that combine art, that elevate the spirit. If you've been through an airport that's been renovated recently, you'll definitely see this. Here's a great example in Austin.
Yeah, this is Castle Hill. If you ever get to Austin, you got to go see this. And it was going to be like condos or something. The company ran out of money back in a few years ago, and the city that encouraged local artists to come and make their mark. And now it's a tourist destination. People come from all over that are spray artists to take this little piece of the city and add their own expression to it.
Mm-hmm. And people are also doing this with their own personage.
Right.
Body art, tattoos, kind of a fashion-centric approach to expression and everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as we think about this, are there other, and feel free to share these in the comments, are there other trends that you see that were like these, that would be considered natural forces, like this current that's moving through society? Is there anything else that you see out there? Mm-hmm. And
what are some of the other ones that you see?
Well, I think you mentioned it when we talked about the crumbling of institutions and all that. I see a return to individualism.
Definitely.
I see, you
Yes.
see this with the fact that, the actual largest voting bloc in the United States are independents, registered
Absolutely,
independents.
yeah.
That's an example. You see it with non-denominational belief systems, a lot of those. And you see also the return to the maker market or the crafter market.
Absolutely. That's a big one. As a working mom myself, I see it a lot with my peers who, my kids are a little bit older, so people are beginning to think about, returning to the workforce, but a lot of them are just choosing to begin their own pursuits, and whether it's through Etsy or it's through some other online marketplace or just sharing their thoughts, and it's much more about defining your own way forward.
Yeah.
For them.
And one of you mentioned vulnerability as a trend, and that's true.
Definitely.
And it's
Brene Brown.
Yeah, Brene Brown.
Thank you very much, Brene.
Crying in public. I've
always done that.
I know.
I'm a trendsetter.
That's one of your potential memoir titles.
Yeah.
Crying every day.
Yes. It's good for the soul, people. Don't be afraid.
So let's keep moving along.
This is, speaking of crying in public, I love this man. This is my father. He is floating in the Dead Sea. He is over the age of 70, and he just made this trip to the Holy Land. We use this photograph to illustrate the awake leader. My dad spent his career in corporate America, bouncing around and joining startups. And after he retired, lost my mom to cancer, just kept on awakening, kept on pursuing passions, kept on learning, kept on caring for others, and really is the definition of an awake leader. Continues to consult a little bit here and there as well, but it's this sense of openness, of adventure, of being a curious learner throughout life and caring for people.
And I had the privilege of staying with him. I think to the introduction. The last time I was here in Phoenix, I stayed with Bill at his place, and he's a millennial. He's an older millennial in his mindset. So we use him as an example to really kick off the meat of our discussion, which are these 5 traits of an awake leader. And as we go through this, we encourage 2 things. One is to self-assess. And the second is to challenge our assumption. If you self-assess this and you see where you're at, you can give it a scale of 1 to 5 or however you want to do it, or just have a visit with yourself if this is you.
Right.
Or if you have a challenge to it, we would love to hear, because this is basically observational research, looking out on society and the thousands of conversations that we have and the massive amount of content that we consume. And so this is what we see, but you may see something different, and that's okay.
We welcome that. Yeah,
we welcome that.
Absolutely.
So the first one, does anybody know who this is before we dig into why we're talking about high EQ? Anybody know? You can type it into the chat if you know who this is.
You have a beautiful smile.
We'll wait just a second to see if anybody knows.
Anyone recognize this face? We should have like a little music.
Music, yeah. I don't like that song. No. So this is the CEO of Microsoft. His name is Satya Nadella, and we choose him as an example of the first trait of awake leaders, which is to have high emotional intelligence.
Yes, yes.
And so go ahead and explain emotional intelligence.
Sure. So emotional intelligence is really your ability to process your emotions, react to them, allow them to run through you without running you, acknowledging them, and being able to relate them, but don't let them necessarily run your life in a very reactive way. It also has a lot to do with empathy, understanding others, impulse control, and it is, and there are plenty of assessments that measure EQ. EQ, the possession of EQ, is the single most predictive quality of a leader. Of a leader,
right? One of our friends of Root, remember Whit Mitchell, has this line that the death of every executive career is caused by low EQ. And there's a great quote from Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor that really is my favorite way to describe EQ. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Mm-hmm. That's high EQ described as as described by someone in the darkest situation. Yes. So the reason we have Satya on here is that he did three things. First of all, he challenged, when he was made CEO, he was sort of a surprise that he was made the CEO after Steve Ballmer resigned. But he challenged Microsoft's culture of denial. Mm-hmm. A very common thing that happens in large corporations is a sort of institutional low EQ, which is no awareness of what the problem is, that we're pretending like it doesn't exist. And Microsoft's brand was really, really damaged, and it was reflected in their stock price and in their ability to retain talent, a bunch of other things. The second thing that he did is he brought a Zen mindset to strategy, just like Steve Jobs did. And rather than the Western John Deming, Jack Welch approach, very linear, very structured, he brought a much more spherical or circular Zen view of strategy. Mm-hmm. And he instead of trying to adopt 50 years of industrial age thinking, he brought 5,000 years of tribal thinking to the company.
Yeah, I was just reading an article about him, and he said the single most important thing any organization can do is connect to its mission and purpose, and then build the culture.
Exactly.
And Microsoft's mission is to empower people with tools that will change the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting is because of him, and this is just a personal anecdote, I was very anti-Microsoft for a number of reasons. In fact, in my first book, I referred to them as the ultimate oatmeal brand.
Yeah, you did.
But I use their products now. I use Skype. I use Microsoft 360. I use Outlook Mobile, which is a slick tool. And I probably will never buy a Windows laptop. But because I'm an Apple OS guy. But I use a bunch of Microsoft products on Apple. So not that I'm the indicator of it, but. Okay.
So rate yourself too on that high EQ, how you're doing on EQ. All right, next one is mission motivated. Anybody know who this gentleman is? Now, a couple of you were able to.
Yeah, you got the CEO of Microsoft.
Identify Nadal. But what about this guy? Do you know who he is? This is Larry Merlo, and he is the CEO of CVS. So he is definitely somebody who is mission-minded and motivated. We selected him because, first of all, I just love his story, right? He started as a pharmacist inside of CVS and worked his way up, all the way up to CEO. So I got to give kudos there. And his whole purpose is really helping people on their path to better health. And of course, you may expect that. Doesn't seem so revolutionary from the head of a pharmacy. But here's where it gets interesting. So recently, Larry decided to stop selling tobacco products in CVS. And this is a $1 billion income source for his company.
I think it was the third after pharmacy. It was as far as a line. It was the third most profitable line that they had.
Crazy, right? But he did it because of his commitment to the mission. How can we sell something that is detrimental to people's health while also using this path to better health as a guidepost for our customers? It couldn't settle for him. So he decided to stop.
Yeah,
it's huge.
It is, and the other reason we love him is, we a while ago we posted a video and we actually wrote about the term PMS, pale, male, and stale. Yeah. And he is a middle-aged white guy, yet he's awake. If you go Google just his picture, you can see he's got a light in his eyes. And we watched a video of him being set up by being ready to go on air.
Right.
You noticed. Go ahead and say what you noticed.
I did. I noticed that when the sound guy came up to give him his mic and plug him in and everything, first thing he did was shake the gentleman's hand, look him in the eye, shake his hand. There was an exchange of of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
which really says a lot. It was just sort of this outtake in between scenes.
With the human.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
you're just like acknowledging the person. A lot, and I've seen this. I've worked for years in PR. I've seen people just be extremely dismissive to anybody who
Mm-hmm.
would be considered the help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So that was, I thought, pretty
We've both
telling.
been the help.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right.
Sure.
So think about
how much motivated are you?
Right, and how much does that drive your decisions as an entrepreneur in particular, or as a leader?
Right. Anybody know who this is? It's sort of a giveaway, though.
Yeah, just don't, without Googling it, do you know who this is?
So this is David Lavezzi. He is the founder of Kind Bar. And what I love about him is that he has this great capacity for love. And this is also rooted in his personal story. His father was a survivor of Buchenwald, Holocaust survivor. And I always get emotional telling this story. As a child, David heard the stories of the concentration camps, and in particular, the story his father told that his father was starving and working one day, and a German soldier, when no one else was looking, threw his father a potato.
Mm-hmm.
And his father felt that this saved his life in this moment, and was struck by the kindness of another human being who was, the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of shattered him in a good way, but it really literally saved his life on many different levels. So this idea of kindness, and the idea of bringing people together and providing wholesome food, all of this was wrapped into the same idea for Dave, and led to the foundation of Kind Bar. And also, this other cool thing, that wasn't enough for him. He actually has a nonprofit that helps bring together people from Israel and Palestine, and just trying to reduce conflict. He gives away tens of thousands of dollars to recognize acts of kindness in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very spherical, because all of these trends overlap.
Mm-hmm.
It's very spherical and Zen-like in the approach, and just in his desire to give love and to venerate kindness.
Mm-hmm. So we say this trend is the capacity for love. What we mean is essentially not, and I'm going to be very blunt, but not emotionally damaged. We're all scarred by our pasts and situations and things, but there's this cloak of pretense that leaders carry, that they pretend like they don't hurt, and they don't have fears, and they don't have worries, and then it damages their ability to give and receive love. Mm-hmm. And love is the most powerful force on the planet. And when you attach it to your brand, it basically makes you unstoppable.
Right. And that means loving the people that work for you, that
loving
work
yourself.
with you, loving yourself,
mm-hmm.
and just not being afraid of that. Like, that's not something that you do and like, shh,
right.
I love you, buddy.
Exactly.
No, it's just out there.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, so our last, we have two more. This is Insatiably Curious. So anybody know who this is? You may not know her face, but you may know her brand, which is, this is Maria Popova, and she's the founder of Brain Pickings, which is a blog and a website and a newsletter. She started it in 2006, an immigrant to this country, go immigrants, from Bulgaria originally. But she started this email basically to about 7 friends in 2006, and just interesting tidbits, articles, things that she had found, things she was reading. She started sending it out. To now, her website has at least 1.2 million visitors as of 2014 a day, and probably millions of subscribers as well. It is supported entirely by readers, and she does all of the compilation, all of the reading, and all of the synthesizing of all of these ideas from various sources herself. Her Brain Pickings was recently included in the Library of Congress. It's totally ad-free, supported by readers, and she was recently named among the 100 most creative people in business. And she does it all by herself. It takes her about 450 hours a month to compile. She just reads an incredible amount. And if you are not a subscriber or a visitor, I highly encourage you to check out Brain Pickings.
And so this idea of insatiably curious is I think first an inner work where there's we would call it a spiritual curiosity about yourself and your place in the world, and especially if you feel a calling to be an entrepreneur or a leader, to be curious about that and to see what it means from a big picture standpoint. The other part of insatiably curious then is external, like what are we doing, what's going on in the outer world, and then rather than looking at it through the scarcity mindset but looking at it through an abundance mindset. And she's built basically, well, not even basically, she has built a profitable media company by following her curiosity.
Absolutely.
And there are many examples, but she, as we were going through this, was one of our favorites just because of her story about following that whisper of the heart to the point of where she's successful now.
Absolutely. I think in business a lot too, curiosity can be somewhat threatening when you're the leader, like, oh, if I get too curious, it'll get me off course, right? You got to stay true to these goals. I think it's really important for leaders to understand that curiosity can be a guide. Right. You know, it can be kind of a spiritual guide in your work, and it can fuel you passion-wise, and it brings innovation. So nothing to be afraid of there.
Exactly. The last one here, and then we'll get into how to translate this to your brand, is we love to use Ellen as the example here. And it's abundantly minded. And so if you were to guess which, you'll know because we used her, but if you were to list off the celebrities that give the most that produce the most for charity, for lack of a better term, you would list off a bunch of people, think of Oprah and whatnot. But actually Ellen has been the most prolific donor of money, and she's a savvy business person, so she ties it into cross promotion. But this is a picture of Zane Beadles, who at the time was playing for the Broncos. He plays for the Jaguars now, and he had his own foundation, and she worked with Shutterfly to give him $10,000. One of thousands and thousands and thousands of stories, and about how her own abundant mindset pours back out into the world.
Yeah. It's really remarkable. I mean, if you watch Ellen or you've seen her before, you see this in the way that she behaves and in her brand. Just so much generosity, and there's so much joy in it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this abundance mindset then it informs you it forms some things as a leader. One is that you're not afraid if someone is talented leaves your company to go pursue their dreams, and you see that in abundantly minded coaches in football or any sport, but football in particular, where they're excited when an assistant coach gets promoted to another team's head coach.
Yes.
Does not view them as a rival, but as an extension, or they literally call it the coaching tree.
Right.
You see it then in leaders of companies, this abundance mindset related to competition.
Right.
And it's not that there's plenty to go around. It doesn't mean to not be competitive and do your best. Yeah, or this, and this is my own strong opinion, this sort of socialistic view of commerce. It's like the pie is finite. The pie is infinite if you're abundantly minded. And we talked about this in a video that we posted yesterday afternoon, but being slightly better is not that hard and also not sustainable. Being radically different is rooted in your mission. And so with an abundance mindset, you understand that if you live your mission and you go do what you do and go be you in the world and go be an awake leader in the world, abundance will follow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a letting go, too. A letting go of sort of what we've been trained in the 20th century mindset, hoarding and holding and like, I got to get this and I got to get ahead.
Got to get mine.
It's sort of like letting go of those ideas that actually will hold you back and allowing it to find you.
Exactly.
So how do we translate this awakeness into brand? Like, how do we make the connection? Why are you guys talking about awake leadership? You're branding people. So here are three ways we think that it can be translated, awakeness into brand. So first of all, we encourage you to be obsessed with the human experience. We are becoming more and more obsessed as a culture and as individuals with our own personal experiences. And so the human experience could be, the experience that you give your clients. It could be the way that you kind of situate your office so that visitors feel welcome. It could be how you handle feedback from your team. the way that you facilitate discussions with your team. The idea is to get inside the minds and the hearts of the humans that you interact with and understand those experiences at a very deep and soulful level. So what does this get you? Ultimately, it gets you more engagement, more connection with people, and that leads to trust, which, as we know in business, leads to deals eventually. But
brand dominance.
I kind of hesitating here to go to the outcomes, because it's really about the practice of just opening yourself up to understanding the experience at a very deep level.
And so it's very easy to see the opposite of this. I mean, pretty much every headline of like United, Wells Fargo, Volkswagen, Uber is what happens when you're not obsessed with the human experience and you're obsessed with something else. We say this frequently, that your behavior as a brand is the only way that other people experience what you believe.
Yes.
So you can tell when there's a restaurant owner or a large corporate CEO that is as obsessive about about the human experience. So
you want to talk about the
So the other part of this is inviting the world to your mission. Everyone's looking for the ultimate differentiator. Everyone is looking for that thing that will separate them from the pack. And that thing is your mission. And what we say is, when you're awake to your mission, is then you're not inviting people to participate in your business model, because really nobody gives a crap about your business model. What they care about, and they don't even really care about your product line, they don't care about your slogan, they don't care that you've got numbers to make. What they care about is your mission and what it means to them in the world. So that's what we mean by invite the world to your mission. Focus all of your branding activity and all of your messaging on inviting people to the mission, not the product line, and then they will discover the product line. And we like to use this visual metaphor. Imagine that when you notice that when a band plays, they play on stage and the merch table is in the back of the room. They play their music, people like it, and they go buy their CDs and their T-shirts and their beer koozies. So that's what we mean by that.
Yeah. And the third is to share what you've learned. This sort of goes into the abundance mindset as well, doesn't it? We are not here to have an insular experience that begins and ends inside of our own minds. In fact, that's kind of a recipe for craziness, if you ask me, right? We're here to actually share what we've learned along the way. Going back to the example of Marcus Lemonis, his entire presentation at this huge conference, hundreds of people, was sharing what he had learned as an individual and what the audience had learned. And just in that process, so many other possibilities and connections, genuine connections, were made. So awakeness, if you are awake to the experiences that you are having and the lessons you are learning, the next step is for you to share what you have learned. We work in a space of thought leadership and help individuals understand what their own thought leadership is. And it's so powerful when people move to that space. They're not selling something, they're sharing what they've learned.
Yeah, they're telling, not selling. And so content is a commodity. You got to do it. You got to. I don't care what you're selling. You need to produce original, thoughtful content.
Yeah, make it good.
Yeah, exactly. And there's two thoughts to that. One is, I'm weary of the conversation about ROI. And as an awake leader, there is an ROI, but ROI is the outcome, or as Ken Blanchard, another awake leader, says, is that a profit is the applause for a job well done. So to obsess about ROI is to obsess about the wrong thing. Now, you want to be smart and business-minded and all that. If you want to have ROI attachment to something that you share, have it be attached to the number of followers that you have, or the number of people that you're impacting, or the lives that you've changed.
The number of conversations that you get into as a result of the content.
Exactly. The other aspect to it is, we're entering an era now where really smart brands are giving away what everybody else is selling and selling what everybody else is giving away. And MIT's MBA program is an example. You can go on to MIT's website and actually take the download the entire MBA curriculum, coursework, get the textbooks and everything, and you can actually take the course, the MBA program, for free.
Right, Harvard does this quite a
Is
bit
that
as
right?
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what you don't get is you don't get the piece of paper at the end that says, I have an, yeah, so it depends on your intention.
Yeah.
And that's an example of
This is kind of a cool weeding out
Right.
sort of idea.
Exactly.
Probably the students in that class are maybe more motivated. I don't know.
Well, when MIT first did this, which was a while ago, actually, maybe 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
all of the alum that had spent all that money,
Yeah.
they flooded strongly worded emails, probably written by men who wear khaki pants.
Did they mail letters too?
They probably mailed letters.
Yes.
The older ones did.
I love it. That's awesome.
Anyway.
All right, let's
they had
move
their
on.
secretary
Oh, right.
mail the letter. They make fun of that term.
Right.
So, moving along.
Yes.
So,
haters wanted.
this idea that what's going to happen is you're going to get detractors.
Yeah.
And there's a great commercial that Tim Tebow shot a couple years ago where he was reciting all the negative things that were being said about that, and he just looks up at the camera and says, thank you. Or no, he says, appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's an example of turning detractors, of dealing with detractors in a gracious way.
Yeah.
And you're going to get this.
Yes.
You're going to get detractors in any area of any area of your life, and it's really going to come from three areas. You're going to get detractors, and we'll dig into how to deal with them. The first one is going to be people on your team that are, we don't call them asleep because that seems a bit self-righteous. What we say is institutional.
Mm-hmm.
They're institutional leaders. They every Friday night they go to Applebee's in their Buick, and they've been doing that for 30 years, and they're not going to change, and now you're a threat to them. So that's the first one, people on your team. The second is people in your life that are your friends. When you hear about someone, you see this often when there's a couple and one of the couples gets in really good shape and the other one doesn't, the other one is trying to talk them back to the Twinkies and Cheetos.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to change. And then the third one you're going to get the people that are directly threatened by your mission. And they're threatened by your mission or your message because they are making money, their business model, they make money off of ignorance, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And I one time was asked of somebody, a friend of mine who loves Rachel Maddow, and this isn't a criticism of her, but this person told me, you need to watch Rachel Maddow with me. So I sat through it. And then she said, well, what'd you think? And I said, I think Rachel Maddow is a great business person because she was able to convert all of this anger that people have on that particular side of the political spectrum into a bunch of ads that ran. Now, it's a little bit of a dark view of it, but it's still this idea that you're going to have people that are going to be threatened by the fact that you're a threat to their business model.
Definitely. That's very real to them. So the way that we can deal with this is, well, we'll give you three little tactics to try here. Just being awake doesn't mean that you're going to be suddenly in this beautiful bubble where you never have to deal with detractors. So in real life, IRL, you can work on turning a detractor into an ally. So I don't know if any of you have ever read the work of Bob Goff or read about him. He's an incredible person. I'm currently reading his book, Love Does, it's just super awesome, and I recommend it. But basically, taking somebody who disagrees with you or is a detractor and trying to understand where they're coming from. And all three of these kind of play together. But in his book, Love Does, Bob talks about after 9/11, sitting down with his kids and getting their ideas on what they should do in the world and how they should, what kind of action they should take. And they decide that they want to talk to the world's leaders and just understand what the world's leaders, each one of them as individuals, what their hope is for the world, what their hope is and what their personal goals are. That's all. So they sent out all these letters, the real story, I just love this, sent out letters to the world's leaders and asked if they wanted to come over for dinner and talk about their hopes and their dreams and what they wanted as individuals. So they sent them out, and they got a bunch of no's And then slowly the yeses started coming in.
Mm.
Now, the leaders wanted them to fly to their respective countries and meet with them, and that's what they ended up doing.
Mm.
So he pulled his 3 kids out of school, got some harshly worded emails and letters from teachers, and he went around the world with them. And these kids just had conversations about the individual leaders' desires for the world.
That's
amazing.
Awesome. That's awesome.
So and across the political spectrum. And so people who were enemies sort of became friendships.
Exactly. And there's always going to be one of them that is the most vigorous detractor. And just to use a historical biblical lesson, remember that Paul was first an enemy, and he flipped. And that's an example from changed the course of history. So the second one is to neutralize negativity by agreeing with them. We often refer to this as conversation jujitsu.
Yes.
And in jujitsu, which I've never done, but I've studied a lot because I like this idea of this metaphor, is basically using another person's aggressiveness against them. Mm-hmm. And I don't particularly like this guy's politics. In fact, I don't like his politics at all. But someone who's really, really good at this is Bill Maher, the talk show host. And he will get people on, and when he's in debate mode, he neutralizes the negativity by agreeing with them on the surface. So he'll take a premise that they're saying and say, all right, let's say that's true, and then he'll build his case around what they are claiming. Mm-hmm. And it's a really brilliant strategy for dealing with a detractor.
Mm-hmm. Finally, show people the data. We have a client who's very good at this, who can listen, hear all the woes, hear all the scarcity mindset.
Right. All the ROI talk.
And then show them the data, but in a different way.
Right. It's the data of the human impact.
Absolutely. There we go.
And it can be measured. This is a thing that we get this. We've had this a couple of times. I can't remember her exact terms. It was a detractor that we had in one of our root sessions where she was like, this is all woo-woo and
touchy-feely,
artsy-fartsy.
Yeah.
And what we use there is use this technique to show her the data. And it shows that there is an ROI. It's not a line item ROI, but there is an ROI for being a decent human being.
Absolutely.
Think of the brand damage done to United because their ROI mindset was around this particular policy that they had, as opposed to data would show with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of open-mindedness that that was an expensive decision that they made.
Yeah. That's a damage, right? Return on investment damage to investment. That's what I want to know. Huge. So these are our thoughts. These are our ideas. And now we move into open discussion. This is where we get to hear from you. What did you agree with? What was offensive to you? What did you
what do you want to know more of?
Yeah, what did you want to know more about? Just kind of throwing it out there, and feel free to type into questions or into chat anything that you might want to challenge us on or learn, hear deeper thoughts on, anything like that.
One of the questions that came through earlier from someone listening in is, some people have natural leadership gifts. Can you learn to lead? That's a really good question.
Learn to lead.
I think that we all are leaders at something. And I think we are leaders, and I think it's related to our mission. So I think that if you're trying to be a karaoke singer or a cover band for a particular leadership style, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can learn to lead like someone else. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be a leader, we must lead ourselves first. So first of all, that takes understanding who you are, and then it's more of a practice. I see leadership as a practice. Until you go out and do it, on a foundation of deep knowledge of the self, and you understand also where your soft spots are and where you want to get rounded out a little bit more, you're probably not going to be as effective as a leader. So I think, I kind of disagree with you. Like, I don't think that leadership is for everyone. And I think there's tremendous value in being a supporter of somebody who's leading.
I find it shocking that you disagree with me.
Oh, yeah, do you? Yeah. You didn't see him, but he just fell off his chair.
You're right.
It's very dramatic. Yeah, I mean, I think we all have different roles, and there's value and there's honor in all of those roles. So.
Exactly. And if you have a question, the best way to have us see it is to type it into the questions feature or the chat feature. Either one, we're monitoring either one. If you have a question, you can type it right in there, and it conveniently tells us.
Yeah.
One of the common questions that as we see if other questions come in from you guys, but one of the common questions we get is, where do you start? Or where do I start? And so I think we can both add our flavor to this question. We mentioned it earlier, and you said it even about leadership, about going inward. There are three areas that are going to affect your awakeness as a leader, and I'll be very direct about it. One is unresolved childhood trauma. If you haven't gotten help for the crappy stuff that happened to you as a kid, those are the type of grooves in your soul that you can't just pave over with time. You got to go get some help. And because it encourages costuming and this sort of encasing around a person, you can't be awake you can't be an awake leader and carry around this protective scar tissue around you and relate with people and live your mission. I think the second thing as a starting point to inner work is to listen to basically embrace your anomalies. We all have something that makes us a little weird if you dig in, and those things most of the time we're told not to be. So that's number two, and then number three is it's a very spiritual thing to say, but you need to listen to your heart. Our minds are a muddy river, but if we listen to our hearts, we'll generally know what direction to take. Oh, some more questions came in.
So someone asked if we could give some examples of clients who have done a good job of integrating their mission into their message. The ones who are selling the mission first. Well, that's something we practice, or we encourage all of our clients to practice. So what do we say?
It's really all of them. Let's use a public example, because all of our clients do that.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that. Let's reverse engineer it.
Sure.
We've had a couple of clients that they had this epiphany in the root session, and they didn't do it because it was terrifying.
Yes.
They went back. They returned to their old life, and they went to their old business model, and that was safe.
And everything's the same.
And everything's the same, and we don't condemn them, because it's scary to meet yourself.
Right.
But you see it in public brands. One of the more famous ones is Tom's Shoes. I mean, there's a company that's bases everything off of mission from the very beginning. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think our first client, which is a industrial fan company,
right? And
the leader who we did the root session for broke off of a larger industrial fan company because he realized the technology could be better, and it could, if he developed this different technology, that it would work more effectively, and it would actually impact the working people who stand under these fans all day in large workspaces. And so his mission was to disrupt the industry, but also to give the working people a better environment and better health. And so through his root session, we came up with the root belief that different is cool. And it was more than just, it sounds maybe like a tagline to you, but at the soul level for the leader, it was what he was all about. He had this large like a large tribe of children, a large family, and he just decided to, was disinherited by his family. Right. So it sort of encompassed his whole person, but it was also very connected to his work. They're still using that root message in all of their marketing, all of their materials, all their brand identity, and the business is going extremely well. And so I would point to that as an example.
Great. Yeah, great question. Another one that's come in is I often find that people mistake my kindness for weakness in the short term, but in the long term they get who I am. Any advice? Such a good question. Any advice on how to accelerate that acceptance of where I am coming from? Yesterday,
that's interesting.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Yesterday, I had an epiphany, and I shared it out on social as a little picto musing, and it simply said, speak truth sooner.
Yes.
Speak truth sooner. And so to your question, Greg, that's what I think it is. I think what the weakness is our own self-talk, that we have to soften our message or make it just so that they like us. And then when they do that, then we can sort of ease them into our way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying not to be gentle. I'm saying that that if you speak truth sooner, they're either going to react to it in a positive way, or they're going to react to it in a way that they were going to react to it anyway, in a negative way. You just get it out of the way. It's like either they become closer to you instantly, or they repel from you. But you got to speak truth sooner to do that.
Yeah, one of the other things I would say, and as a woman in business, there's so many assumptions that people make immediately based on my behavior, my appearance, or what have you. What I found is just being very direct about the assumptions that they're making.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in touch with that, just, I like to say, yeah, I'm small but mighty. Mm-hmm. Or I like to just be very direct. People talking about strength or like whatever, I'm like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, strength is, birthing two children. Yeah. To just sort of address, maybe in a lighthearted way, the assumptions that they're making, but to be very direct about it. Mm-hmm. And say, yeah, I'm a nice guy, but I'm also extremely savvy. Put it in your own, words, and as I said, maybe add some levity to it, but to directly address that. Because people get stuck in these little narrow ideas of what it, oh, if he's this, then it's that, then it means this. And right. Just to try to disrupt that.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, another common question that we get is, where can I read more about this? Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm going to recommend a couple books, and if you have a couple books, then that's a good starting point. So the first one is by Court Dial, which we've mentioned several times on this webinar. His book is, you can get it on Amazon. It's called Heretics to Heroes, and it's a memoir of modern leadership. And it's about Court's awakening as a leader many years ago, and then how he used his awakening to transform an industry, transform an entire industry. The second one is by our great friend Jacob Nordby, called Blessed Are the Weird. And Blessed Are the Weird is a manifesto for creatives. And his premise is that we're all creative at something, and that's the anomaly that I was talking about as a starting point. How about you? Do you have any book recommendations related to awakeness or awakening?
I just read the Book of Secrets by Deepak Chopra, and I would definitely recommend that. It's phenomenal, and turns on its head many ideas of awareness and awakeness. So definitely recommend that. So
those are 3 book recommendations, and if you guys have book recommendations that around this particular topic, go ahead and post them in the chat, because we'd love
post them on social.
Or post them on social. Give the author a little Twitter love. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're going to make this recording available for those of you that registered. It'll actually go out to you via directly. So thank you for participating and your great questions and great input.
And we did put handouts in the handout section, and some of the things in there have to do with our offerings and the way we think and yada yada. So feel free to check those out if you'd like. And
you can download them directly from the handouts pull down.
Or if you're listening to this later, feel free to reach out to us and we'll send them on to you.
Exactly. And so if you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that at rootandriver.com. Follow us on social media. Yeah. Right. Follow us individually. We're both fairly prolific on our own private accounts. Emily is Emily at Large, and I'm at Foster Thinking on both Twitter and Instagram. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. We enjoy being with you, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Goodbye.
Bye.